The courtroom was unusually crowded that morning, as if justice itself had whispered that something important was about to happen. Reporters with sharpened pencils, murmuring lawyers, and cautious clerks all turned their eyes to the front as Karoline Leavitt stood tall behind the plaintiff's table. She wasn't a high-powered attorney from a million-dollar firm, nor a veteran of flashy trials. She was young, fresh-faced, and driven by something the law books couldn't teach: conviction. At just 30, Karoline had gained a quiet reputation for defending the voiceless, standing up not for attention but for people forgotten by the system. Today, she was representing an elderly black war veteran named Samuel Hayes, wrongfully evicted from his lifelong home due to a fraudulent bank scheme protected by powerful interests. Judge Ronald Greaves adjusted his robe and cleared his throat dramatically. Everyone knew his name. For years, whispers trailed behind him like shadows, deals made behind closed doors, verdicts bought with donations, and rulings that always seemed to favor the rich and well-connected. Karoline knew the risks walking into his courtroom. She had no illusions that this would be fair. But she also knew that injustice only grows when good people choose silence. As Karoline began presenting her evidence, documents, testimonies, legal precedents, the judge's disdain grew more obvious. He interrupted her repeatedly, sighed exaggeratedly, and rolled his eyes so often it became a sideshow. Then, just as she laid down the eviction papers with clear signatures proving Samuel's house had been taken without consent, the judge leaned forward with a smirk. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, his voice dripping condescension, "it's admirable you've come all this way with your little performance. But the courtroom isn't a stage for political hopefuls or emotional fairy tales. You're young. You're ambitious. But frankly, you don't belong here." Gasps rose around the courtroom. Karoline froze, not in shock, but in disbelief. Not for herself, but for Samuel, who sat quietly behind her, his hands trembling in his lap, as if the war hadn't broken him but this moment had. She steadied her voice. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said, "this man served this country in a war that gave you the freedom to sit behind that bench. He paid his mortgage on time for 30 years. The only reason he's being thrown out is because someone else wants to profit off his pain. If compassion is a fairy tale, then perhaps the law has already failed." The judge narrowed his eyes and waved his hand dismissively. "This court is done entertaining nonsense. Case dismissed." There was a silence so heavy it hurt. But before Karoline could speak, a loud voice interrupted from the gallery. "That's enough." Everyone turned. From the back, a woman in a crisp navy blue suit and badge stepped forward. The room stilled as agents followed behind her. She walked straight up to the judge, her voice firm. "Judge Greaves, you are under investigation by the Federal Judicial Integrity Task Force. We have evidence of wire fraud, bribery, and case tampering spanning the last 8 years. You are hereby placed under arrest." It was as if time broke. The courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in truth finally unchained. The judge, now pale and wordless, was handcuffed in front of the same room where he had humiliated so many. Karoline turned to Samuel, who blinked in quiet disbelief, his eyes watering. "But, how?" someone asked. The federal agent turned toward Karoline. This young woman didn't just build a case for her client. She exposed a pattern. Every document she filed was a piece of a puzzle that led us to him. Her commitment didn't just defend Mr. Hayes, it helped bring justice back to this entire courthouse. Karoline was stunned. She had suspected the judge's corruption, but never imagined her pursuit of truth would have this ripple effect. She had only wanted to help one man. As the judge was led out, murmurs turned into applause. Not for the spectacle, but for the stand. For the idea that truth can still cut through the rot. Samuel, silent until then, reached out and gripped Karoline's hand. "You remind me of the good this country still has," he whispered. She smiled, tears threatening to spill. No one should fight alone. Days later, a new judge reviewed the case. Samuel's eviction was reversed, and the bank was ordered to pay damages. Karoline didn't speak to the media, didn't accept interviews. She returned to her office, modest, with a flickering lamp and a coffee machine that barely worked, and kept fighting for people like Samuel. The story traveled far and wide. Across the country, people saw it not as a courtroom drama, but as a reminder that justice isn't in titles or robes, but in the courage of ordinary people who choose to speak up, even when it's hard. Karoline's inbox overflowed with letters, young law students inspired by her courage, veterans grateful for her stand, single mothers who now believed their voices mattered. She replied to each one personally, writing late into the night, her heart full. In a time when cynicism ran high, her story reminded people of something simple yet profound, that integrity is louder than corruption, that kindness can be a force, and that even in broken systems, hope can rise. Because sometimes, all it takes is one brave soul in a quiet suit to change everything.